Welcome to Talent Alchemy. And this is my third episode on the skills ecosystem series. And today we'll talk about Mercer. Mercer is a leading global consulting firm focused on talent, rewards, workforce strategy, and more. And they have been around for 80 years and need no introduction. So today's guest is Paul Habgood. He's a partner in workforce transformation at Mercer and Mercer's global skills solution lead. And Paul brings more than 25 years of human capital experience across different sectors and industries. And he's widely recognized for his expertise in workforce transformation and building skills-powered organization. Paul, welcome to Talent Alchemy.
Thanks, Rinky. Great to be here, and thank you for the invitation. Super excited. I have to admit, when I first saw Talent Alchemy coming through, I thought you were inviting me to cocktails, but also happy to support the podcast series and think about your clients and how they engage with us.
Absolutely. And we can definitely plan for some cocktail the next time I'm in London. Paul, how would you describe Mercer's role in helping organizations rethink talent in a skills-first or skills-powered world today?
Yeah, great that we're here talking about this. One of my passions. So skills powered, as we call it, is really important. How do we help clients? Well, we often actually start with actually helping the clients understand why they should move to skills and why now. We are in a world where we are dominated by lots of big stories. How is AI going to impact our organization? And obviously AI and skills are intrinsically linked. So we spend a lot of time making sure that the clients have a clear focus on the business outcomes that they want to achieve, that they have a vision for becoming that skills powered organization. And then they thought about how they're going to think about the use cases, how they're going to prioritize those use cases, and really importantly, what's the digital experience they want to give their employees and their leaders as we start shifting to a skills rather than role-based or job-based set of data around the work we do and the workforce.
Yeah.
And then to extend into that story, we can often be their partner for the journey of that transformation. So we've had the pleasure of working with clients for, over 5 years, some of them on their skills transformations journeys. There's not really a destination. It's continuously evolving, but we've had that amazing experience from the very early adopters and obviously helping a lot of companies now think about skills and how we can deliver better outcomes for their people and organization.
In the last, I would say, 5 years almost, skill is becoming a board level conversation. It is not just an HR initiative. So if we look at the full journey from asking why skills to actually becoming skills powered or skills based organization, let's talk about where does Mercer plug in across that life cycle and your core capabilities. What do you think would be Mercer's core capabilities in helping organization in that becoming a skills powered organization?
Yeah, and maybe I put up the slide that we
Absolutely.
look at. And so we've just spoken about helping clients define why they're going to do it and get that really important alignment across HR, but also alignment with the business. And as you know, Rinky, it's really important we have this as a business, not just a HR transformation in our clients. And then we talk about these three elements. They're interconnected elements of how organizations need to unlock the ROI of obviously your product, SuccessFactors and the Talent Intelligence Hub power, but also this transformation to becoming skills powered. So I'll start on the left, and no surprise for most of you who know Mercer, we are all about the data. So how do you build your job architecture? How do you make sure your job architecture is ready for skills? Skills change with career stream. Skills change for a job as you go up levels or grades within that particular job. So how do we make sure the job architecture is fit for purpose? And if we've got 10,000 people who work in a single job, we're not going to get a meaningful output when it comes to careers or learning suggestions within SuccessFactors. So that's the first bit. The second bit under that data bracket is the skills architecture design. So are we thinking about how many skills we have? Do we want behavioral skills and technical skills? How do competencies and skills live and work together within our organization and within our technology system? How do we think about enterprise skills versus individual skills for a job? So how do we design the architecture? And obviously that has the mission to make sure it goes into the attributes library. It is powering how we think about the types and the tags that we can use so we can govern it successfully. And skills governance is another area we're really supporting clients on, making sure they can keep this data fresh and it's continuously aligned to their business. We have data, and our skills library is a massive accelerator to help clients map skills to their jobs. We have a huge job library, which comes out of a legacy of our job architecture and reward business. And we've taken market data, we've normalized it, cleaned it up, and linked it to all the jobs in our job library. So you can immediately get that instantaneous view of what the market is saying the skills are for jobs. And really importantly, what the potential proficiency level you would expect each of those skills to have within a job.
And I'm guessing that is industry specific, that skills data, right?
Yes, and there's a lot of data we do around skills insights that actually shows how in different industries, the skills and for an individual job are becoming more and more variable. When we look at the automotive industry and how their manufacturing works, you see 60% commonality of skills across their engineering jobs. And the job title is the same. So we have to have that lens not only of industry, but often where the organization is playing in the value chain of that industry, and also how are they actually getting work done, because it's the work that's defining what skills they need. And my last point there after governance was the measurement strategy. We talk about how do we do self-assessment? How do we get managers or peers to help validate and continuously validate the skills that people have in their profiles? But at what point do we need formal assessment? At what point do we say that set of data isn't accurate enough for us to make a talent or business decision on, and we want to go further on assessment? So we can bring in our expertise around assessment, but also help build that skills measurement strategy. So we have your brainwashed today, Rinky, on skills powered. So we call that kind of the skills powered job architecture. How do we create that data, and how does it feed then into success factors to power the experiences?
And Paul, I've been working with a lot of our customers who are trying to be skills based or skills powered organization. And I'll tell you, the job architecture is the one main area where most of them struggle, because defining that job architecture and mapping those skills, industry specific skills, to job is where most of them struggle. It's really exciting to see how detailed your core capabilities go in that area.
Yeah, and if I can tell a client story, I think there's a lot of fear
Mhm.
in clients of how much work this is. I have a CPO of a client who said, well, I thought this project to build this data, fix our job architecture and map skills to it was going to be a mammoth, but it's turned out to be a poodle. Which means it's not such a big project, and it's a little bit of fun and agile, and it's going to have some training over time, but at least it's not this enormous project that we're going to have to undertake. We've now got AI, we've got tools like our accelerator to really help us do that quickly, and to make sure the business buys in and feels they own those skills is also super important when we go through this process.
And I have actually worked with your team with at least two of my customers. I think this is one area where even I suggest my customers, when there are, partners out there who are specialized in this space, without burdening your own COE, why not use those specialized, skill set?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we want to make sure there's that joined up thinking here, as
Mhm.
well as we provide the accelerator. We can do so much work now with generative AI around skills and mapping skills to jobs, but we want to make sure it's done in an efficient and effective way, and we get an output that there's a data story that we can attach to it. When you deal with engineers or science-based companies, the business leaders are expecting a how did you get there, not just this is the answer. So that's a really important factor of how we work with clients around building their skills data. Right. So the next thing that we have to connect to this story is what is your people strategy and what is your digital and AI strategy? If we have organizations that are large, they often also have large HR technology tech stacks and ecosystems. And Rinky, I'm not sure if you've heard this phrase, but when we first saw Talent Intelligence Hub and we first saw what careers and talent development was going to do, I said, well, hold on, this is going to be an inflection point for clients around their HR digital strategy, because they actually have been thinking, oh, I need point solutions to do these things in my organization because my core HR platform doesn't do it today. And then suddenly we're in a position where we actually could rationalize our tech stack. We actually could deliver a more seamless consumer grade experience through one platform. So where do we need to be very deliberate with a additional technology? And obviously you work with the Phenoms and the Beameries, particularly around the TA space. But where do we now go? Well, we don't need all these other point solutions because we can bring everything into the SuccessFactors environment and deliver it there. So how do we think about the experience solution and technical architecture? And then how do we think about how we're going to normalize and synchronize skills across an ecosystem if we are using skills in more than one systems? There's nothing worse than 8 levels of proficiency and a person's profile looking like one thing in one system, and in our core system of record SAP it looks completely different. So we want to make sure that experience gets delivered. So how do we help organizations think about that and design that? And then finally, there's this impact on HR themselves, and I've been doing a lot of projects recently, which I sometimes call the Wheel of Fortune, because we're kind of working out who's going to own skills in HR. Skills work east-west, not north-south in a COE. They touch every aspect of what HR does as a function, and they're being embedded in our HR technology as the metadata that's powering our AI. So we often have to think about how do we reconfigure HR as we move to becoming skills-based. You see, I'll use your term as well, a skills-based organization. And then how do we also at the same time layer in some of the other big stories around how's AI going to become the front door to AI for our, to HR for our employees, and how we reconfiguring HR to focus around outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a big place that we are really helping clients at the moment think about, and how do we drive that transformation of HR itself as we go through the skills journey.
Absolutely. And Paul, I also want to highlight one thing here is that when we look at the partner ecosystem recently, there are a lot of new partners who are more focused on AI when we talk about skills, right? But I want to highlight here for my audience that Mercer, you have been around for 80 years, but recently you have also gone through a transformation, and AI is playing a key role in your technology and in your offerings too. So you are not left behind.
No, absolutely. And we have a huge investment in becoming AI first, from data, products, services, delivery, etc. We're seeing that manifest already in lots of new solutions. We've got our own large language model, which we can use for doing amazing things around skills and job profile building, et cetera, et cetera. So we've embedded AI and embraced it very early on. And we know it's the future of how advisory firms will engage with clients being supported by AI, but also how can we bring those tools to clients that are AI powered, that means that we're able to give them faster impact and greater impact. So key part of our strategy.
Yeah. And also, what stands you apart? I mean, if I just look at this slide itself, you are not just supplying the technology. I mean, you're not just providing a skills library or mapping skills to job architecture, but it's more than that. You actually hold their hand during that skills power transformation with your
Yeah,
advice.
100%. I think it's important to say, we're not the systems implementer. Yeah, we're
Right.
the strategy, the science, and the sustainment of skills in organizations. How do we actually get this done, and how do we transform? And so we're super proud to work with other members of your partner ecosystem, and we
Yes.
often join up and work with clients, whether that be that Beamery and Phenom or the Tech Wolf or the Talent team. How do we complement some of the more technical aspects of implementation with these transformations that we support? And, there could be some overlap in terms of how that looks and works. And we've figured a lot of that out to make sure clients get the best of both worlds if they are using other partners at the same time.
Absolutely. It's an ecosystem. So
Yeah.
we can't be here alone. And I mean, in your this slide, that third box that says skills power transformation, I just want to highlight that second point there, design for skills powered people, processes, and journeys. I think, again, this is one area I see a lot of customers, especially those global big customers, they struggle. Everybody wants to be a skills based organization, often because it's the new shiny thing in the market. But how do you actually integrate those skills in people processes or the career path or journey? That's where I see a lot of you know limitations. But I really appreciate how you also help with that aspect too.
Yeah, there's a lot of, oh, that's what it means for me
Yeah,
conversations that suddenly happen in these journeys where your head of TA suddenly starts thinking about, oh, we're going to reconfigure and start hiring for skills, or we've got visibility of everyone's skills so we can completely rethink how succession planning works. And it's just suddenly those moments of visualizing the from and the to, and then how that creates such an amazing impact on our people and how they are empowered to suddenly own their own careers and own their skills and go on learning journeys. It's a really important part of this. And sorry if I wave my arms around and get excited, but it's just so powerful when we see this come to life in organizations. But we don't want to individually look at these processes. We want to have that connected story for our employees. And I
absolutely.
think so many clients have started with a single use case and sometimes got a little bit sticky and
Yeah,
stuck because there's
yeah,
not enough of a story that means our people feel, wow, I'm back into success factors often, updating my skills, looking to see what learning I should be doing, looking to go where can I go next on my career. And we need that stickiness and that really powerful story to make sure we embed this in the organization.
yeah. And Paul, let's talk about some customer success story. Can you share? I know you already shared one about one customer, but can you share a success story where skills transformation truly changed how the organization operated using Mercer's capabilities?
Yeah, let me share a couple of stories because I think it's also really important for people to realize there's no blueprint.
Hmm.
This occurs. You don't go from A to B to C, and every company goes this way. It has to be grounded in exactly what you're facing as an organization today, and how you're going to think about solving those challenges. So, if I take a large financial services company, they were deeply wanting to align the skills transformation and to the business strategy and also the economics. So cost optimization was a big agenda point for them.
Okay.
And when they looked at the digital transformation of the organization, they could quickly see that directionally they were going to have to reskill large populations of their workforce. And they weren't set up to do that. There's a famous number that's been around that the CPO said, well, it's £48,000 more expensive for me to make people redundant and hire the new skills than for us to invest in reskilling and upskilling our current workforce. So that drove that behavioral shift of, okay, we need to understand how do we deconstruct our jobs and work out what the skills are that we need for the work we're doing today. How do
Yes.
we embed that continuous learning culture? How do we use projects and gigs for learning in the flow of work and for people to experience and express their skills? And then how do we make sure this is driven through the organization at every level so that we're continuously driving that skilling so that we don't have those redundancy issues, that we are signposting the sunset skills. Where do we need to not have the skills in the future? We're signposting the sunrise skills. What skills do we need in the future? And we're taking people on those journeys from sunset to sunrise. And there's some interesting little stories within that, such as, well, actually, we could reduce our contingent labor costs because we're suddenly building the domain expertise in some of the skills we're relying on the contingent labor, and they're more expensive than our employees. So this created a bigger cost story that meant the COO, the CEO, the CFO were becoming our friends in the transformation rather than we're pushing the business, because it became part of that P&L story of how the company would function going forward.
And that's a measurable outcome, right? That will give the leadership confidence that this is just another HR initiative. So I love that you can actually measure that outcome, the KPI. Yeah.
And we've been pretty successful at measuring the value and then delivering the outcome relating to that value. I think what's been really important is you have those metrics of success thought from the design principles right from the day one. And what are you trying to achieve? And then technology is great because it gives us huge amounts of data, which we can then translate into value, whether it's how many people did we manage not to hire because we got the work done with our existing workforce? How many people did we manage to do more than 30 or 40 hours of learning every year? So we've suddenly created that culture of learning and we're not having to hire in these skills.
Looking back, what would that customer have done differently if they'd started again? Or there was any lessons learned that you would take it to your future customers from all these success stories?
Yeah. So thinking about that specific customer, and then if you're okay, I'm going to answer it more generically from quite a few clients we've worked with. I think the business alignment piece is where they would like to have spent more time. We talk about mindset, heart set, skill set, and tool set. And I think if we don't get the mindset and heart set of the business aligned, then we are always going to be having those internal battles. Many clients like them, the business had done a lot of work on this already. So HR came almost a little late. And we were also having to then kind of unpick, realign, repurpose some of the work they were doing. And that's a lot harder than starting from a blank piece of paper and going, hey, this is how we're going to design and do it. So for me, it was that the lesson learned would be earlier engagement with the business, making sure they're on board would have been really helpful. And then on clients in general, I think the biggest lesson learned is, if I can go back to my diagram a little bit, bring these connected things together.
Okay.
This can't just be a story around learning. We've got to have the HRIT team
Connected
involved.
experience.
We can't just, I'm still seeing a lot of clients having this driven out of one COE rather than they going, hold on, this is about how we reimagine work and the workforce, how we reimagine the employee experience. Let's get together and do it as a team. And hence we spend a lot of time doing that piece before we even start doing any other work. Before SuccessFactors can go live.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think, we have many partners who can implement the technology, talent intelligence hub. I think what makes Mercer uniquely positioned in that skills powered conversation is your advisory service. And you are there from the beginning when they are deciding about skills transformation all the way to the end. Is there any specific industry or company size that you focus on, or you pretty much work with large, mid-size, all kind of industry?
Yeah. So definitely no specific industry. The skills story is more predicated by the HR leadership team and their mindset and whether they want to go on this journey rather than which industry or where they're headquartered in the world at the moment. So
Yeah.
It's not an industry play. So in terms of size of organization, I think the smallest clients we've worked with are around 2,000, 2,500 employees,
Okay.
which brings a different dynamic to
Hmm.
how we think about a
Okay.
skills-based or powered organization, how we would operationalize it. That's often the tipping point where tacit knowledge of their people gets lost. And therefore data now needs to take over and drive people decisions. But we usually work with, larger organizations, the 10,000 plus employees, all the way up to the large global multinational companies on their skills journeys. We have worked a lot with small single, country, 2,500 employee companies as well. What's a really interesting space is how the high growth tech sector is all about the skills
Right.
because
Right.
they naturally already think
Yeah.
in that language. They are a huge part of our client base as well.
Okay, great. Let's talk a bit about roadmap or innovations, where you are heading in the next maybe 5 years. Where is Mercer spending is, your money on innovation, especially when we talk about skills and talent intelligence related offerings.
Yeah. And you've asked a big question because you've gone 5 years out. So that's always a little bit tough to go that far out.
Yeah.
But one of the big stories we're helping clients with, and we're going to continue to invest in, is how do we design work? Organizations are going to want to make sure they understand skills relating to tasks. What is the optimal mix of humans and technology to execute those tasks? So we're already doing a lot of work in this space to redesign jobs, to think about what the future looks, to understand what new work people will do once we redeploy it to technology, and to have AI powered tools to help clients do that. We will continue to evolve in that space, and that's going to really support how we think about broader concepts around how we operate as an organization. So we have this phrase around how do we get the talent to flow to the work? And if we can see the skills of the talent and the skills of the work, we don't just think of it in terms of projects and gigs. This becomes the systemic way that we operate as an organization, as technology takes away so much of the mundane, the repeatable tasks. So work design, AI powered tools already there, but we're going to be investing heavily and more into that space. I think there's a space where clients are now wanting Mercer to help them forecast future skills better.
Okay. That's a good one.
So we're already building skills insights. So we've got that directional picture of here are the trends that we've seen. Here are the skills that are happening in your competitors, in your industry for particular jobs or functions. But we need to make sure that we continuously invest in how can we then give the signals of things like agentic skills or the
Okay.
meta skills that the
Okay.
organization needs. How can we start forecasting that, we're going to need completely new skills in some of our jobs. So we want to take that ... of the trend
Yeah.
line
Yeah.
and take it further. I'm not sure we'll go 5 years, Renki, but we might go
Yeah.
2 to 3 years out and
True.
go, and here's that trend. Because if organizations have an investment of time and money to reskill people, and that takes 6 months, if we don't have that more directional, longer term view of how skills are going to change, we're just going to keep repeating that cycle. So we want to give them that better signal on where they need to go with their
Yeah.
learning efforts, etc.
That's an important area because, again, when I speak to my customers, they're all talking about skills based workforce planning. If they can get that forecast, again, the signals, the trends, the insights, that will be yeah, that will be golden. Absolutely.
We do a lot of things, we call it future skills planning.
Okay.
We already help a lot of clients, and we've even helped clients who have gone 10 years out in their strategy because they've created a new business strategy and decoded the strategy into those future skills for 10 years time. But those are
Amazing.
the fun projects that,
Right. Right. Yeah.
you're futuring in its true sense. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
you were having to create some logic, and explaining how we got there. But it's definitely a space we're seeing demand increase from our clients.
On a closing note, if a CHRO or a HR or talent leader is listening today and they're just starting their skills journey, what's the first move you would suggest them to make other than contacting Mercer?
Phone ring key. So I said it earlier, have a clear vision and a story you can articulate of why this is going to be important and what value it's going to deliver to your organization. If we can't get our leaders on board, we can't talk in their language, we will always be perceived that this is just a HR initiative, and it's not. It's something we want to deliver to the business. So get that vision written, understand what the value is you're trying to unlock, and that will really pay dividends on A, getting everyone aligned, but often B, getting money from transformation teams rather than the HR budget to get this work done.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, skills transformation is ultimately about technology, data, but more importantly, mindset, that mindset change. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. It was great having you, Paul. Thank you. Thanks for all those insights. I think there's a lot of new things about Mercer that even I learned today. I'm sure my audience will appreciate that. And thanks again for your time.
No, thanks, Ronki. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to carrying on the conversation.
Absolutely. Maybe next year, once you have some of those innovations come to life. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Stay curious, stay golden. Have a good one.